Everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present in the Civic Hall. Can I also remind members of the public present that this is a formal meeting, and whilst we do welcome your attendance, we ask that you do not approach members of the panel during the meeting and that the proceedings are observed quietly and without interruption. If this is not adhered to, you may be asked to leave and the meeting will be suspended whilst this is facilitated. City Plans panel deals with applications from the city centre as well as the largest and most significant applications the council receives. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, registered speakers and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. Can I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphone once you have introduced yourself, and if we can start from my left, please.
Good afternoon. Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management and Lead Officer at today's panel.
Good afternoon, Matthew Walker, Principal Planner, City Centre Team.
Good afternoon, I'm Lisa Brannan, Principal Engineer, Highways.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Katie Dye, Killenbeck and Seacroft.
Afternoon, Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth.
Good afternoon, Councillor Peter Carlisle, Carlin Farsley Ward.
Afternoon everyone, Councillor Andy Rodri from Kirkstall, and I'm substituting today for Councillor Brooks.
Hello everyone, Councillor Asghar Khan, Councillor for Bermondsey and Richmond Hill Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Annie Maloney, Beeston and Holbeck Ward.
Good afternoon, Lewis Footick, part of the Plans Panel admin team.
Good afternoon everybody, Councillor Dan Cohen from the Woodley Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Colin Campbell.
Good afternoon, Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adland Wharfdale Ward.
Good afternoon, John Stonard, Team Leader Design and Projects.
Good afternoon, Andy Booth, Clerk to the panel.
Good afternoon, Amy Davis, Legal Officer.
Good afternoon, David Feeney, Chief Planning Officer.
Thank you, everybody. And moving to the agenda, item number 1, please.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item number 2, there is no exempt information on today's agenda. Under item number 3, there are no late items. Moving on to agenda item number 4, could I ask members if they've got any interest to declare? I'll take that silence as a no. Moving on to agenda item number 5, apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Brooks and Councillor Rontry in attendance as substitute today. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And agenda item number 6, the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 13th of March 2025. I will go through them for accuracy first of all, and then take matters arising. So the minutes from the 13th of March, page 1 of those minutes, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Is everybody in agreement that they're a correct record of the meeting? Okay, thank you, members. Any matters arising from those minutes? No. Okay, thank you. Right then, moving on to agenda item number 7, Wellington Road, the development on the junction of Wellington Road and Armley Road. Matthew, can I invite you to make your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall this scheme was discussed at the March meeting of City Plans panel, with the item deferred and matters to take away for officers to deal with. Just to refresh memories, this is a CGI of the scheme, and for the benefit of today's audience, the scheme comprises 3 blocks of residential accommodation, totaling 384 apartments, standard units and duplexes. The scheme also provides 191 square metres of commercial floor space and areas of public open space, which I will come on to shortly. And this is the site plan on the screen, where we can see the relationship between the 3 blocks and the areas of green space that I just mentioned. Now, members will recall they were unsatisfied with the proposals on the basis of 3 distinct issues: the proposed level of affordable housing, the level of green space provision and lack of connectivity to nearby green spaces, and then the design of the building, most notably how the building addresses the corner of Armley Road and Wellington Road, and also the elevation to the A58. So I'll address each of these issues in turn. Firstly, affordable housing. So I've set out on the screen the progress that's been made on this issue, and the report at section 3.18 sets out the latest and final developer offer on this subject. Members will be aware, of course, that the proposals were subject to a viability assessment, which set out the threshold on obligations that the district valuer considered the scheme, whether the district valuer considered the scheme would become viable, and that's set out at point 2 of the slide on the screen. And further to that appraisal, the developer made an offer at that point of 7 units at discounted rent by taking a longer-term view on the overall profitability of the scheme. Well, the developer has again reappraised their ability to take a longer-term view on profitability and has made a final offer to provide 19 units on site as a pro rata extrapolation of the proposed housing mix. This is the final offer which the developer advises is the maximum possible, and it's this that members are asked to consider today. And members are also reminded at this point of the late stage review mechanism secured by the Section 106 agreement to address any further fluctuations in costs and viability at that point. So the second item is the level of green space provision on the site. Members' concerns were effectively in 2 strands, the first being the level provided within the envelope of the site, and then as a result of that proposed extent of green space, the impact and pressure this scheme would place on existing green space provision in the locality. So to start with the first strand, members will recall the scheme as presented in March detailed a green space provision of just over 800 square metres. So new information has come to light, which has helped in this situation, in that the proposals for the adjacent new pedestrian link have required less land take than was previously expected to be required, and this in turn has provided an opportunity to work up a landscape design where sufficient enclosure can be provided to the area between the corner building and the A58, which will allow that area to be laid out as publicly accessible, be meaningful in that regard, and of a sufficient scale to be practically usable and attractive enough for both residents and the public to enjoy. And we can see that here. The topography of the site means that to gain meaningful enclosure, the perimeter of the lighter coloured area would require some additional tree planting than was previously expected, and a form of at least informal boundary treatment to delineate the usable area. However, officers consider there are climate change benefits which would arise from the change in this regard, which should give favourable weight to the scheme. The detail of how this area is laid out will therefore need some very careful consideration at the condition discharge stage. However, we are satisfied and sufficiently reassured this can be delivered as shown and be of a sufficient quality to provoke public use, but also improve the setting of the corner building, which was a point made by members in the previous plans panel meeting. The layout will include seating, biodiverse rich planting, which will need to be of hardy species and pollutant filtering, given the location adjacent to the highway environment. Formally, officers, due to the expected high land take that was expected from the new linkway, officers did not consider it was appropriate to count any of this area towards green space provision. However, in this change in circumstances now gives us that opportunity, which contributes a further 881 square metres of publicly accessible space within the envelope of the site. And we can see the area in question here in its relationship to the cycleway in a section drawing, and we can see how the new area of green space in the adjacent roadway from the gyratory, where the new pedestrian and cycle link forms an enclosing element to that space. The second change is the removal of the residents' paddle court from the scheme and the giving over of this land to additional publicly accessible space. That change takes the central area of amenity space, which was formerly the only area of green space counted within the site, from 815 square metres up to 955 square metres. Again, the conditions proposed in the report appendix would be used to control the layout, but essentially this central area would be a multifunctional space with formal and informal play features. And here's a CGI to that effect. And then the final change negotiated by officers is the reworking of the layout of the area at the top of the site, again, which was previously not included in the green space calculus overall, but has been revised to maintain an acceptable layout of defensible space to habitable room windows, which will be buffered using landscaping, but are now also shown to be laid out with seating and lawn spaces, which will be accessible to the public and may provide a useful spot to pause and sit on the journey from Armley Road into the city centre. Again, the finalised detail of all features here are proposed to be secured through the conditions and the Section 106 agreement in order to maintain public accessibility of the space in perpetuity. So to summarise on the overall issues first strand, the previous scheme would have delivered around 800 square metres. The opportunity presented to the developer and the revised layouts will now instead provide over 2,000 square metres of publicly accessible space within the site envelope. And whilst there's no direct comparator to this, but just to put that level of provision into context for members, the closest approximate match to that level of provision in the city centre is Park Square, which comes in at just under 2,500 square metres. So that gives you some impression of the amount of space being provided. So to move on to the second green space issue, members have expressed some concern regarding the pressure this development will place on existing green spaces in the vicinity and how these spaces don't necessarily lend themselves to use by residents in terms of their typology. To be considered relevant, local green spaces should ideally meet the 720 metre radius shown on the screen there, which reflects the requirement of policy G3 in the core strategy. Officers have therefore looked at this issue more closely and can advise there is a mixed typology of existing green spaces within the vicinity of the site. The aforementioned additional provision in the site envelope obviously assists in terms of increasing provision, but as you can see from the slide on the screen, there are 4 spaces of different size and flavours which the residents can make use of in the vicinity. I'll go through these now. The first is within and adjacent to the Otter Island development, where there's some incidental green space in 2 pockets and also access onto Oddy's Lock, which has some seating opportunities and sitting out spaces available there. The second area is that adjacent to the Powerball pitches on Kirkstall Road. This area becomes more meaningful and relative to the scheme in that the new pedestrian link across the watercourse is now built and will be operational shortly. This space affords seating, a place to pause and some limited play space for children. And it's also worth noting at this point that the adjacent City Island scheme will connect into this area and provide a degree of further publicly accessible space. This slide indicates the closest publicly accessible space at Doncaster Monk Bridge. Whilst it's predominantly a route, the High Line offers an elevated and landscaped area suitable for sitting. And then finally, and certainly most relevantly, this area shown on screen is known as Jaley Fields. This site lives just across the ward boundary in Armley and Wortley ward and is a council-owned and managed amenity space within walkable distance of the site. There's some photos of Jaley Fields. This space is of relevance to the site not only by dint of its distance, but also its typology. This is a sort of kick a ball, hit a ball type of space which not too many city centre developments have such ready-made access to. It's extensive in its scale and therefore differs in character to the smaller pocket and route type spaces I've just mentioned. Jaley Fields includes a number of plain sport provisions. I think most importantly, it's extensive in its size and provides a different option to what we normally see within the limitations of city centre developments. Now, the site is accessible, Jaley Fields, in 3 routes with respective distances involved. The shortest involves the use of a footbridge and therefore isn't accessible to those with mobility needs. The second is longer, involves the use of a ramp footbridge and is therefore more accessible. And the third route is the new route provided around the gyratory, which is entirely accessible to modern standards, albeit via a slightly more convoluted route. All of the routes to this play space sit within the envelope of the aforementioned accessibility criteria. So notwithstanding the increase in public open space provided through negotiation and revision to the scheme will still generate a sizable off-site contribution of around about £530,000. Officers have identified a proposed improvement scheme available at Jaley Fields, and it's considered this scheme could provide a funding opportunity via the off-site green space contribution to activate the improvement scheme, along with other local green space improvements to mitigate for the population impact of this development. And then this could be a wider benefit for not only the residents of this scheme, but the established local community in the adjacent ward. So members are therefore requested to consider this in their overall considerations. And the final of the 3 overall issues to address is that of building design. A limited number of the panel members expressed some concern last time round that the proposed building form and facade treatment of the corner building was not of a landmark quality, and given that the building will in effect act as a gateway into the city centre, this should be reconsidered. So in terms of form and massing, members are advised that the overall design is grounded in maintaining and preserving the setting of key heritage assets, and this slide shows how the building form steps down to reduce the overall gravitas and presence of the building in respect of the listed roundhouse buildings, and also has regards to the more residential scale of One Canal Place, which is the brick building to the opposite side of the road at the corner. Officers are of the view that a fundamental revisitation of the building form here would undermine the assessment that we set out in the report to members previously, and it's therefore not proposed to revise the form of the scheme. In terms of the overall materiality, officers remain of the view that the scheme's character should be set and reflective of the local context, and the slide on screen here and the next slide shows how the use of brick and arched openings is contextual in terms of local heritage assets. So officers consider this element of the overall design process undertaken as being sound, and this is maintained in the final design. However, members were quite correct in their assessment that there are opportunities to improve the appearance of the building when approaching from the gyratory towards the city centre. The slide on screen shows how this will be achieved. Members would observe in particular the bottom right-hand image here, which is essentially strengthening the building parapet. The manoeuvre here is essentially strengthening the building parapet to the left-hand of the facade to give some more visual gravitas to an element of the building which will be seen mostly by vehicular traffic in passing from Armley Road and Canal Street in south-eastbound movements before their onward connection under the railway and then along the A58 into the city centre. So that change there is finalised and can be seen on screen there. And again here, so you can see the before and after. John Stonnard is with us today from the design team. He can answer any questions you might have on this specific point. However, essentially, officers consider that this change strikes the balance between improving the building's overall visual standing, but without compromising the relationship to the setting of the heritage assets. Members are therefore asked to consider this in their overall considerations. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any speakers today, but we do have the applicant here if we do have any questions that arise during our discussions on this agenda item. Okay, so as we have no speakers, I will move directly to questions then. So do we have any questions for officers from members? No? Oh, okay, Councillor Campbell.
Can you just go through the design again? Because I'm looking at that, and the bricks appear to be a different colour, but we'll assume that's part of the problems with CGIs and all the rest of it. But they're actually the angle at which we're looking at that is slightly different, isn't it? So this one's slightly sharper, and that one's more that way. So can you just walk me through what's different?
What it is, that bit of parapet that is different. It's strengthening the corner. In considering this scheme, the point was made about it being the potential for being a landmark. However, it was never envisaged as a landmark from this elevation. It's seen as a landmark as you approach from the gyratory, and you can see it above the railway viaduct. So you get three slender towers. This elevation, as per the approved scheme, is relatively long, relatively tall. It's set back some way from the street. It has the green space in the foreground. It has the listed building on the opposite side of the road, but it also has the viaducts and the former warehouse building on the front, just off shot here. So you've got a cluster of much lower properties, which are really the focal point of that area. And then so this building has. It diminishes in scale on the corner, so it gradually tears down. So the view was that the real focus of this building was that corner where the parapet has been raised, so it's to strengthen it from the gyratory side. And the approach that was really picked out in the presentation last time, this new route that's been created from the viaduct and around, so that's where the focus is intended to well, yeah, thank you. It was well illustrated in the slide. Elsewhere on the building, it's very well articulated. It's got deep reveals. It's got very large windows. It's got balconies. It's got expression. It's got very detail in the brickwork. It has a tripartite arrangement, a clear roof, top, middle, and bottom. The bottom is emphasised with a strong arched colonnade that then flows around the corner to emphasise the street frontage. So, as I say, the emphasis was very much placed on that corner.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions before I move to comments? No. Okay, thank you, members. So do members have any comments that they wish to make on the proposals? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the presentation and the CGI images, I think the design is very impressive. And I also, feel that since the last time it was presented and now, it's gone back to the drawing table, and I also do welcome the green space for community as well. So, and just on the design, because the ward I represent, I've got one of the most multi-storey blocks, and I do welcome the balconies. People want to come out and, relax, enjoy after a long day of work as well. So I do welcome the balconies on this design. And as you know, this is if somebody's coming into Leeds, this is on the main corridor into our city, and we want to make sure our city represents one of the best cities in the UK. And if with your, I'm happy to move for approval, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Khan, and seconded by Councillor Cohen. I did just have Councillor Blackburn indicating to speak, so I'll make a comment. So I will. It already indicated before that happened, so I will bring Councillor Blackburn in, and I will come back to you.
Right. I think I won't say they've done everything that we wanted, but they've made a real effort to try and come up with something, and I will listen to what we said. I welcome what was said about Jill Field. He needs some investment in it, and clearly that's the nearest sort of parkland to the site, so I welcome that. But on my way here this morning, I passed that. I had to go for my eyes testing, so we're in Pulsey, and I come down at 72. I went past the site, and I've got to say, that looks a lot better than what's there now.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I think we all agree with that. We'd like to see the development start, definitely. Okay, so any more comments before I move? Before we move to recommendation, anything to sum up?
Very little, Chair. I think we've had a couple of comments there acknowledging the design improvements and welcoming the revisions in terms of the other aspects that members were concerned about last time round. So, very little to say at this point.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Khan, you are moving the recommendations on page 11 and 12, seconded by Councillor Cohen. Thank you. Can I move to the vote then? By show of hands. So those members in favour of the recommendations on pages 11 and 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Right, that's 10, and that looks unanimous, but I will just go through. No abstentions, nothing. But some people do change their mind as we're going through. So, okay, that's unanimous. Everybody in favour. And that is carried. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to officers for the revised presentation and input. Jonathan.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm that members have determined the application in that it will be recommended, or it was recommended to be deferred and delegated to the Chief Planning Officer to be approved, subject to the conditions which were listed in the previous report, which was appended to the summary report, and also subject to the 12 listed obligations within the summary report that would form part of the Section 106 agreement, which does include a late-stage review viability appraisal at the appropriate point of 75% occupancy. And that was it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, everybody. Very short meeting. So the only thing left to do is clarify the date and time of next meeting, which is on Thursday, the 8th of May at 1:30 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance.